Let us know when you're ready. Thanks for coming today.
Testing, testing, 4, 5, 6. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
You guys hear me over at the table?
Yeah.
At least I got one response. Okay, let's start. So, welcome everyone to the rapid fire lecture presentation of today. Really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know, I'm Rami Unger. I'm the HWA Ohio chapter coordinator, and I'm one of the people who organized this event. So thank you for coming. And today I am talking about horror as therapy. Now, I'd want you to think about that word for a second. Therapy, what comes to mind? I'm sure you're thinking right now of maybe a group setting, people sitting around in chairs talking about life, or maybe someone lying on a big red couch talking about their childhood while someone with a clipboard writes down notes and then asks, so how does that make you feel? Now think about self-care. What's something you do that it is considered self-care? And this time I want someone else to actually answer. Sudoku? Okay, what's some other form of self-care?
Bath.
A bath.
A walk.
A walk? Anyone else?
Chocolate.
Oh, chocolate. That's a dangerous one, but yes. You could also, I'm surprised nobody's mentioned going to the beach or getting a massage, but yeah. So those are all forms of therapy and self-care. You wouldn't think of things like ghosts popping out and screaming at you, or masked killers walking around with hatchets, or terrible entities from beyond this world coming through to kill us as a form of therapy. But you'd be surprised, horror in the right context can be quite therapeutic. A study from last year that was published in the Journal of Media Psychology, he studied horror fans in both America and in Denmark. And they came to some interesting conclusions. They found, sorry, I need a drink. They found that horror fans could be divided into roughly 3 groups: thrill seekers, white knucklers, and dark copers. Now, the thrill seekers approach horror as like people who go on roller coasters for fun. They do it for that thrill, or for the this is so much fun. The white knucklers are the people who enjoy getting through it. Like, oh, this is scary, but I'm getting through it. My knuckles are white, but I'm enjoying myself, and I conquered it. I conquered this scary thing. I made it through. I feel good about myself. And the dark copers are the people who find horror therapeutic. For them, it's kind of like getting a reminder after a long day that as bad as your life has been, it could be worse. You could be facing Jason Voorhees, or you could be dealing with a shape-shifting clown monster, or you could be watching Wednesday Addams butcher someone with the creature from the Black Lagoon and wonder, okay, why do they find each other but I don't? For those of you who were not here earlier, that was a fun reference. So yeah, surprisingly, horror can be very therapeutic, but it can also be a lens to help you understand yourself, and to help you make sense of the world around you. Ooh. And there's actually a subgenre of horror that's the whole point of it is to give you that scare, while at the same time in giving you therapy, much needed catharsis. Some of you might have heard of it. Cozy horror? Anyone? Was a pretty controversial genre when it first started coming up around horror Facebook groups. People were like, oh, how dare you call a genre of horror or cozy or therapeutic or meant to not be scary? But it is scary to a degree, but its whole point is not to scare you too much. Rather, it's meant to give you a thrill while at the same time keeping you as far away from the horror as possible. Usually this is accomplished by making the horror itself, the source of the horror, happen either in the distant past. Victorian in England is a popular setting for cozy horror, or just making the horror so fantastic and strange that there's no way it could actually happen to you. Like being stalked by a Lisa Munster lookalike. When is that gonna happen? And for people who enjoy cozy horror, it is both scary, but it is also rather calming. It's nice to get that thrill, but also to read a story where you're at the end, you get a happy ending and it goes on and everything gets better. It's nice. And you know what? I think cozy horror and horror in general can be very therapeutic, not just for the readers and for the movie viewers, but also for the creators, especially the writers. Do you guys remember 2020 and the beginning of the pandemic? Do you remember how we were all kind of nervous and scared about it, how we did not know what was going to happen? People were saying all sorts of contradictory things. Oh, it's not going to be that bad. Oh, it's going to be terrible. Oh, you don't have to mask. Oh, you should mask. Oh, it's going to last maybe a couple months at most. Oh, it's going to last years and years. Oh, you should wash your hands. That's all you need to do. Washing hands is the minimum. You should really isolate yourself. Oof. I remember those early days very distinctly. And I remember being very anxious at the beginning of the pandemic, especially right after we started isolating and working from home. I remember, in fact, I was so freaked out that one time I did not go to bed till well past 3 in the morning on a work night because I just could not get my mind off of the pandemic. So I basically distracted myself by watching anime until 3 in the morning. But then I was like, then the next day I found myself thinking, wow, this pandemic's like a horror monster. It's invisible and it's got lots of tentacles and you don't know where those tentacles are, but they could be reaching out to you from any person. And that inspired me. That night, I started writing a story which would eventually make it into my most recent book, my collection, in Hannah and Other Stories. And it became a way for me to deal with not just the pandemic, but also all the events that transpired, all the craziness that ensued. And you know what? I felt better for writing it. I felt like I was able to deal with my fears of the pandemic while also creating an amazing horror story. And I even got it published and earned a little money off of it, so that's nice. And so horror did help me get through the pandemic. And I'm not the only horror fan who got through the pandemic because of horror. The National Institute of Health did a study, and they found that on the whole, horror fans got through with the pandemic much better than non-horror fans. And that it might be because we all have already experienced pandemics, not in the real world, but through stories. Walking Dead, The Stand, and Stop Me Anytime. But we've seen pandemic horror in fiction time and time again, so we were able to sort of simulate what would happen if we were in those situations long before it actually happened in reality. And thus, we were able to get through it a lot better than others might have. And we've even continued to process our fears of pandemics through stories that are more recent. Lucy Snyder, whose book is over there for purchase, is about a post-COVID pandemic with some really nasty cosmic horror. And I've written 2 stories, the one in Hannah and other stories included, that deal with pandemics. So I'm not saying that if I get to heaven, I'm going to find myself in a haunted house with lots of monsters. But I do think that it's really amazing that you can use horror or the same way you could use a trip to the beach or a massage or a nice night out with friends. And you know what? It can be a whole lot less expensive. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk and to Scary Saturday. Well, not a TED Talk, but practice for one anyway. And I believe, who's next?
Lauren.
Lauren, come on up. It's time for your lecture.
Can't